Welcome back to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Thanks for joining us again as we continue a series of podcasts where we've been talking to some really special friends.
Yeah, welcome back, Leah and Kris. We're so glad you're here with us.
I feel like at this point we need to say with Eric and Bron Whitley and Kris and Leah, like we've done so much recording for this.
It's been wonderful, and I know everyone must be getting so much out of hearing your testimony about what God's done, and
I hope so.
How good He is and how faithful and committed to our healing He is.
Amen.
Absolutely, and I think probably there's the perfect place to start is, you know, in a story, in a journey like mine, there's just so much doubt that God can heal you, that there's any chance of recovery. And like I think we said earlier, we had one psychologist say, well, you know, we're just going to treat your symptoms. We don't want to get to the root cause. And
or medication.
Yeah, and we had another psychologist say, don't ever share your story in full with anybody.
Wow.
Because of the degree of trauma.
And I'll just introduce you a little bit again because we might have some new listeners today. But
that would be perfect.
Leah has been through a childhood in a satanic cult. And so you've been through a real journey of healing in your adult years from all of the trauma associated with that and with God helping you through every step of the way.
Absolutely. And we wouldn't have made it through. I wouldn't have made it through, and Kris and I wouldn't have lasted if it wasn't for God. You know, even in the face of the judgment and rejection and people not knowing what to do, it was very much led by God, the whole process. Even the people brought along our path to help, like you and Eric and another specialist and just different people at different parts of the journey, you know, has all been orchestrated by God. And there were times where we felt like, well, where is God in that? Why have these people turned their back, or why has that happened? And it just became very evident that God moves in different ways. Sometimes He pulls us back from situations, and sometimes He sets things up for us. There's lots of different ways He can do it for our own protection and for our path forward in Him and for what He wants to achieve, I think.
Yeah. So where did we leave off in the last episode?
Well, we kind of came to the conclusion of, after all these many years, like part of this ministry, just to, I guess, clarify and inform people who aren't really around satanic ritual abuse and understand the occult and all that, part of it is you're healing a person emotionally, because there's a lot of fracturing that happens to their heart and to their psyche, and that brings its own consequences. But there's also a lot of spiritual healing that needs to happen. So you have demonic stuff that's going on as well as emotional stuff, plus the actual events. There's bodily trauma that's still there. So it really is a ministry that's holistic in that there's stuff that's in the body physically, there's stuff in the heart and the emotions and the mind that you have to go through, and then there's also the stuff with the demonic.
And the complicating factors, of course, are that a lot of it is suppressed, a lot of the memories are suppressed, a lot of the things that have been done are hidden away, and the personality has been shattered so that the person doesn't remember everything that's happened, and you've got all these different parts kind of popping up here and there as well. And
also that the demonic works so hard to hide that and to make sure that it's not exposed. I remember one situation with the specialist who came in where she had spoken to us and she had kind of asked a few questions and we'd worked through a few things, and she kind of went, oh, yeah, no, it's all good. It's very surface level. They haven't done it really deeply. This is going to be fairly easy to deal with. And what that was is she had been given a decoy. She had been given something that would throw her off the track, that would distract her, that would make her think she was successful while hiding everything that was underneath. And that's part of the complexity of it too, is there's so many layers built in there to prevent it ever being dealt with or exposed.
To keep it hidden, but also even just to disqualify the person, the victim, and make them seem as though they're crazy or they're making it up or it couldn't possibly have happened.
Yes, and I think part of that is also to keep you from ever finding God again, to keep you as far away from Him as possible, but also so that it gets to be perpetuated. This is something that goes from generation to generation to generation. and it's designed the way that it's done so that it isn't exposed, isn't discovered, and it gets to continue, because it really does destroy people, destroy families, really does perpetuate the work of the enemy. And
those triggers are also programmed into you, aren't they? So that at certain points in your life, those things are perpetuated and continued on.
Yes, and like Eric mentioned previously, and I can't remember if we were on mic at the time, but about, marriage and dealing with different situations in your journey of recovery. There is different levels where we would find that we would hit something, and this was probably the case many years back before we knew my story, where we tried to seek help from a counsellor. We would kind of work on a little bit and then we'd hit a wall and we'd go no further, and we'd go through that process every 6, 9, 12 months, and it was frustrating and we would not get anywhere. So it just kind of keeps going and going and going, and so you don't get back to God.
With the programming.
You're programmed. Yeah.
Oh, with triggers. That's right. Sorry, I got distracted. Yeah, with triggers. So at every level of recovery, if you hit, it's almost like a landmine. It's hidden and you don't know it's there. And Eric can testify to this. There were so many times we thought, this is great, we're onto this. And then boom, he would have some demonic entity who would actually raise its head, or there was some authority tied in there that it's like, okay, we've just hit something that was like meant to be a blockage. It's like a firewall where you don't go beyond this.
Distract, redirect.
Yeah.
Frighten.
I just recall, and I'll use the metaphor of a video game, because a lot of people can relate to that. And you get to these different bosses. I know I'm old, but we used to call them bosses, like when you're playing Super Mario Brothers or whatever, and you would get to certain levels, and at the end of the level was a boss. And to get past the boss, you had to learn, specific little moves and button sequences and all that.
And whatever.
Yeah, and whatever else. And so you would be on this boss and you would just have to deal with them. Sometimes you'd play it for 2 weeks without getting past the boss, and you would finally figure out how to beat the boss. I remember that. That was very similar to what we would do. And there were different ones, and I'll name a couple of them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I can think of, we have mentioned the Guardian in past podcasts, and talking about the Guardian. He was one that was kind of something that was hitting a wall. To get rid of him was quite hard.
Yeah. That's because he was the one originally placed, I think, as the one who was meant to walk beside me my whole life.
And yes, and I don't know how we named him. Did you know the name Guardian?
Yeah, that was his name.
Yeah. And so a Guardian you can sort of see in a positive sense, somebody who protects and whatever else, but this was more like an
Control,
assigned, bodyguard kind of thing.
Influence, to keep me in check and to keep watch.
Yeah. So it was like you had this person following you around, making sure you stayed in line all the time. And so that was probably one of the first ones that we overcame. Yeah. And then I think the next one, was it the Dark Shepherd? Was there one in between?
I think the White Shepherd actually was was prior to that.
Okay. You remember this way better than I do.
Yes.
Because you lived it and I was just kind of there. But yeah, so then there was a White Shepherd, and so we got through that one, and then we got to the Dark Shepherd. Now the Dark Shepherd, I think that took us 18 months. I remember it was the longest time, and that was the most belligerent and prideful and sort of secure,
arrogant
sort of spirit I have ever,
because it knew it had a right to be there, and we hadn't discovered what the authority that held it there was yet.
Yeah. So, and if you want to hear more on the Dark Shepherd, I have shared this. I didn't share that it was Leah and Kris, but this was part of their story, and I have shared it in more detail in a past podcast. I think it's called Testimonies of Triumphing Over Darkness. So if you want to go back and listen to that, you can. But the Dark Shepherd was a really painful, hard one. And it was, what we had to do was, my reputation was on the line and other things. It was a really stressful thing, but the beauty of it was, in the end, so we've been battling with this thing, and God just came and disrobed it, and then you got to see underneath the robe, and there was nothing there.
It was so quiet.
Yeah, it was a quiet, peaceful, you think this is going to be a big fight. Jesus just disrobed this thing and kicked it out in such a easy manner. And you're just like, oh, was that all it took?
Yeah, it was a bit of an anticlimax.
And I said that to Eric right before he went that day. He was worrying about it, and we were praying about it and stuff. And I said to him, I've been praying about it, and I feel like God's just saying, it's going to go really easy. It's going to be simple, nothing to it. And it was.
It was, because Jesus did it. I didn't cast it out. Jesus cast it out, which was just incredible.
And it was so quiet. Like, that's what I remember. Like you said, we were bracing for war. We had prayed, we had fasted, we had looked up scriptures, we were all ready. And then when we went in, it was like, okay, well, this is where that authority is from. This is what's holding it in place and why it is entitled to stay. And once we addressed that authority and we broke it, it was done.
And that's the beauty of this approach to deliverance, is to do things in such a way where you're listening to God, you're letting him lead the way, and he shows you where the legal footholds are for the demonic. You simply remove them and then they just have to go.
Yes.
And so it becomes an honouring process. It's not loud, it's not messy, it's not punching people.
No.
It's not hitting people with the Bible. There's no screaming necessary. It's just simply a loving, gentle process, because God is the one leading the way.
It's all about his authority. And that's the thing I've learned. And I just want to encourage you, if you've had bad experiences with deliverance or whatever, find somebody who operates in authority. It's not a power encounter. We're not as powerful as the demonic. Okay. They are spiritual beings with a lot of power. Like, I'm not going to get in a boxing ring and fight with one, because I'm not a match for that. But in authority, God has the authority, and that's what's really powerful and amazing to see, and God can do it with gentleness.
And I think that he said it so well when you first started out with Leah, he said, just love them. Yeah. And that's what he wants us to do as fellow Christians, is to love one another. And in that we can ask God for freedom, but it should be a loving process.
One thing I want to talk about, because I want this episode to be a little bit educational for folks as well. Sure. And I know we're talking about stuff that's really outside of most people's understanding or experience or exposure. As you go through this, oftentimes people mistake parts or alters, like these alternate personalities, as demonic. I think off the mic we were kind of chatting, and you were saying you were with one therapist who was saying, I can see that you're flipping between personalities. And that is actually something I would always watch your eyes. When I was doing ministry with you, I could look at your eyes, and I got almost to the point where I could tell which personality I was talking to just by your eyes. Your face doesn't change, nothing changes, but your eyes would always give it away. And I could look at you and be like, I'm not talking to Leah anymore. I'm talking to whoever. Yeah. And almost got familiar with it to that point. And I think it's really important to distinguish between an altar and a demonic entity, because they are very, very different. Now, there were some parts that felt demonic and were as belligerent and as mean and arrogant as a demon. From your own experience, do you notice a difference? Like, could you tell a difference in feeling what was demonic and what was not?
I think you can, because with the demonic there is a lot more, it's more angry, it's more hostile. And I think there was a time actually where one of the demons actually tried to mimic and pretend they were an altar. Yeah. But they're very arrogant. They give themselves away really quickly.
And childish.
Yeah, if you actually, just bide your time and speak to them and question, they usually give themselves away because they like to boast, and they tend to out themselves. Whereas for the altars were more coming from not a place of arrogance or anger or hostility or ownership. Like, the demonic really likes to stake their claim. This is my space. I own this. And, they will fight you. They'll go to war over that if you try to, which is where we hit a lot of those walls.
It's like territorial, really. It's kind of like invading a foreign country. When you start stepping on their toes, they're ready to fight.
Yeah, because they had been given authority for that piece of my life based on curses and blood sacrifices and all that type of thing. So they had that was theirs kind of line. So whereas they're this is mine, very hostile, the altars were more coming from a place of the trauma that they'd been through. So they were a lot more quiet, not as keen to step forward and speak unless they knew they were in a safe place, and often came like the walking wounded. They were, you could see that they were traumatized.
They present
they were
as
quiet.
A person.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're willing to talk to you, you can converse with them as a person.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they would come, and if you were, and one of the greatest giftings of prayer ministry, the way that you've done it, Eric, is that willingness to listen and wait on the Holy Spirit and be curious and ask questions, whereas a lot of people in prayer ministry come in and they know what to do and they're very bold and they're going to take authority and they're going to do this and they're going to do that, whereas you were always very much, okay, let's have a look here, what's happening, Holy Spirit, please speak to me, let's kind of navigate that way. And when you did that, the altars would gradually step forward because they felt safe and they felt protected.
And I'll say too, I actually leaned on you quite a bit. You would come in pretty often knowing where you needed to go, and you would tell me, this is what we need to work on. Like, you didn't necessarily know everything that we needed to do, but you'd say, this is an area that I know that we need to work on. And so we would go to that place. I would a lot of times let you sort of lead the agenda of the day and follow your lead, because you're the one living with this. You're the one that's been journaling and talking to God, and you know what's going on internally that I can't see and I don't know. And so I think that was a really important part of our dynamic of working together. Was I didn't want to come in as the all-knowing agenda guy. Here's my plan. This is what we're going to do. In fact, I tried that a few times, and I don't think it ever went very well. Like inevitably there would be opposition to that because it wasn't really where we needed to go.
From the demonic as well as from that dominant altar who went, wait up a minute, you don't run this show.
Exactly.
you very much copped it from the beginning. Yeah.
You're in my house now.
Exactly.
And there can be demons associated with the altars as well, can't there? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they're attached, like they're connected to.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes you'd have to cast out the demon before you could work with the altar.
And that's the way the occult likes it. That's why they will actually intentionally create trauma or torture you to break you, to create an altar, which they then can attach the demonic to, or they can actually attach triggers to. So they very intentionally will do that to serve their own purposes.
So there's purpose and intent. Nothing about this is clumsy or by chance, or just everything is done in a very calculated, methodical, planned out process.
And the thing that I really love, Eric, was you saying that you took your lead by me a lot, and I think that's because from the very beginning it was God who led my recovery. Nobody knew what to do. There's no rule book for this. There's no pick up a book and let's see how you can get free and delivered from the trauma that I've faced. Nobody had a clue. So it was very much, okay, God, from the moment that he provided those scriptures, he's continued to provide pathways and scriptures and, show me the way to do it. And a really visual person, so he would give me a visual and go, well, this is what we have to do from here to there. This is what we have to do. And what we encountered very early on in the journey was I would be saying, this is what God is showing me. But because I was so broken, I was a basket case. Like I said, I was suicidal. My entire world had just exploded. Out of the blue, I felt like I had no control, and because of that, I was seen as the basket case and mentally unstable in that. So they refused to listen to what I was saying God was telling me in how we had to break each stage or move through the process. So it's like the very thing God was telling me was dismissed, actively dismissed. No, that's not my experience. Well, you have no experience. You have no experience with a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. This is what I'm telling you God is showing me. Yeah. But it's like you're just dismissed.
I can remember, I wasn't involved in the session, but there was a session very early on where we had initially started Leah's journey, and Leah was in session with the pastor and the senior pastor and their wives. I wasn't there. I was in another room taking care of the children. And Leah got to a point where she was like, I need Pastor so-and-so. Can you please? And they're like, no. And like, no, I need Pastor so-and-so. Please go. And she was practically begging, and they were like, no.
And this is because it was the pastor that had originally seen Annie.
Yes.
Had challenged the guardian at the very beginning.
And I might be mixing.
Yeah, you're mixing two
sessions. But in both these sessions, afterwards, Leah saying, in one of the sessions he wasn't there and she wanted him, and in another session he was there and she was reaching out to him, like physically reaching out to him, and she said, if he had just reached out to me
or even just touched my arm or just let me touch him.
That would have been like a watershed moment. That would have been literally...
Something would have broken.
Like, and I don't know whether the journey would have continued the same and taken the same amount of time, but he had established that kind of relationship or rapport, or he could have circumvented so much just through that act of... And meeting her like, Jesus met, the woman with the issue of blood, where it was just, or the woman at the well, like it was just love, grace and acceptance. And like that would have just, I think, blown all of that away, or at least really destabilized a lot of that so quickly. But it was just such a foreign thing to do.
Yeah.
Come back to like you being told by God, just love them. Up until that point, relationships that we had a friendship, we had I would say a deepening friendship and relationship with the first pastor and his wife, and we had a number of sessions there where like 4 hours long, 6 hours long. I think we even did one there 8 hours long, which was an absolute I will always be grateful for, because it was some very, very critical times in Leah's journey. But before that, we had a relationship and friendships. I was friends with him. Leah was friends with his wife. We had dinner together. Our kids played together. We socialised. But when that journey started, that was it. I continued with my friendship with him somewhat, but Leah's friendship ended. And every relationship that we had after that, if anything to do with Leah's journey, it was very cold, it was very clinical, it was, this is the process, this is the checklist, and there was almost like no reference to Leah, like there was, like you were allowing her to have a voice.
I got to choose.
Yes, part of the process of deconstructing Leah that the Satanic cult went through was taking away her individuality, taking away herself, like smashing it, but like you
taking away my right to choose.
You don't have a choice, and just enforcing that again and again and again. But then by you coming in and like engaging with and wanting that rapport, wanting that back and forth, and be willing to take the punches with the good, with the bad, the progress with the lack of progress. Wow. I'm being allowed to choose. I'm being allowed to speak. I'm being shown value. I'm being shown worth. It was a practical demonstration.
And there's so many places to go after everything you've said. Like there's so much happening in my head that I want to say, like, about the free will and the choice, and about churches, because you guys were consistent. You stayed consistent, even in us having to leave our first church, not by choice, but by their decisions. We had to leave our first church where my journey started, and were heartbroken, absolutely devastated, because we thought we would be there forever. So we left them, and then we started in another church. But through the whole process, you guys were consistent, whereas churches were very much not consistent. They were acting out of fear basis. They were not really understanding. There was quite a lot of judgment and opposition. And like we found a number of things like disbelief. Like I remember one pastor's wife, because God was always saying, let them see at every level. And by that stage, we'd been through a number of people letting them see, and we were just so raw. But God just said, let them see, because they need to, because they're part of that process of breaking the authority and moving you over to a godly authority. So let them see. And in that meeting where we went and met with them, whenever we share my journey, we try ever so gently to say what's required, but hide people from the horrific details. Like we try to protect people from, in what we've said, we've shared a little bit of the trauma, but it's really doesn't do justice to the degree of trauma that somebody who's survived SRA goes through, the amount of...
I was going to say, you've shared a lot through these podcasts, but I know... like we haven't shared much.
Yeah, no.
We still have not shared much.
Yeah, and it's horrific. So when we went and shared with this pastor and his wife, her response to us after all of that was, well, if your story is true, how did you get out? Complete disbelief of what we had shared. And, there's that reaction, but there is this lack of knowledge with pastors and churches of how to deal with traumatized individuals. Because like I said earlier on one of the podcasts, it's like they're okay with abuse and they're okay with alcoholism and they're okay with this pornography and they're okay with this stuff. But when you bring in the element of the spiritual and go, well, there's actually a demonic element involved, it's like they freak out, which...
Yeah, and I can say from my perspective, because I haven't been extremely involved in the process because I was raising little babies at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a while ago, you know, when this all started. For me, it was really just trusting God. I was never worried about it. I was never worried about there being any impact on us or any of that sort of stuff, because I just trust God. I believe that he is who he says he is, and he says that he won't let harm come to us, that he is trustworthy. And when we're stepping into what he's asking us to do, which in this case is ministry, we have to trust that he's going to equip us for that and that he's going to take care of us through that process. And so for me, I just never worried about it because I just thought, well, God's got us.
Yeah.
And two, I think we've been very intentional. I don't think it's superstitious or any of that sort of stuff, but we've been very intentional to pray. Like we pray really intentional prayers before we start a service. We prayed even before we started today.
Yeah.
And we'll pray at the end of this as well. And we have some really specific intention to those prayers. And I just always sort of trust, as you say, I just trusted God. If I'm praying this prayer and you've called me to do this, you're going to protect me, protect my family, protect Leah and Kris and their family. And we would pray prayers. You know, I think there's a wisdom to caution.
For sure.
But if you let caution become this fear, you've already lost.
I think those who are listening, if you have a heart to love people and to minister to people, or there's someone that you know who's been through something difficult, it may not be the same sort of thing as this, to approach them with love, not fear. Because you should trust that God will take care of you through that process, and that he has called us to love one another. Now, that doesn't mean have no boundaries and go into crazy situations and all of that sort of stuff. But just when you're with people that are in your life or the people that need prayer, don't approach from a place of fear. Approach with confidence, knowing that the creator of the universe is behind you. He's got
right.
you.
So have shared all those things, this sort of negative experiences with different pastors and therapists and all that. What would be one thing you would say? So there's a pastor out there listening today and someone comes to him with some brokenness and he's not prepared for it. What would you say as advice to him of how to respond?
Gosh, that's such a hard question.
I know.
We have talked about this and there has been so much trauma for us involved with pastors and churches, to the point where I would say that's probably been one of the, if not the most challenging part of my journey. It's not the discovery of the traumatic childhood, as horrific as it was. You know, it's not really that. It's not really having to process the grief and the anger and work through the multiple personalities. It's trying to find help from people who and acceptance. Like we have really struggled to fit in. And we felt the need to really hide a lot of my journey and our experiences as a family. Now, remember, we were raising young kids at the same time. Mm-hmm. We had no family support. Kris was a shift worker and I was struggling with dealing with all of this stuff. And I remember there was one day, poor Kris, he's been through so much. I think Kris really developed PTSD as a result of my story, and I'm not joking.
You're not joking.
He really did develop PTSD from listening to my story in prayer ministry sessions. There was one night, and see, this is where it's the perpetual, it keeps going. It's very well orchestrated. Not long after we had our daughter, because we had our first daughter, I got this parcel from my mother, and it was a doll, and our baby was asleep, and I had opened this parcel, and from the moment I saw this baby, I grabbed this baby and I held it, and I was just like, my baby, it's my baby.
But it was a doll.
I sat on the sofa and just rocked this baby, and I did that for a few weeks, and then I started to get, when Kris was on night shift, I started to get fearful of this doll and would lock it in the car, in the garage at night. And then there was one day where I called Kris and I just said, I'm done. I'm going to, our boys I think were at school. I said, I'm going to take myself out, and I'm taking our daughter with me. And he was 45 minutes away. So we lived through stuff. He lived through stuff like that. And I mean, the reason for that basically was, you know, that whole perpetual thing we were saying. Like, I was meant to actually do to my daughter what my mother did to me and my twin. Like, my daughter, my daughter was meant to be dedicated at the age of 3, and this doll was kind of part of that process of triggering me almost to flick me back into that so that I would dedicate her. But so this is the kind of stuff, and that didn't happen every day, but this is the kind of stuff we were dealing with as a couple.
Your extreme love for your daughter, though, is what prompted you to want to change and to not go down that path.
Yeah, I mean, I actually said, I remember one session with Eric, this little girl is, I mean, we love all of our kids, but one day I'll tell this daughter of ours, I remember one day I was lying in bed and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. Like, I have fought so hard, and we were alone, and I just felt so bad that I had brought this upon Kris and our kids, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. And it's like they suffered through it alongside me, and we had no support at that time. We weren't with you guys.
No.
And we had just struggled and struggled and struggled, and our daughter, she was only about 3 or 4, climbed up into bed beside me, and I was just lying there thinking and planning how to do it, and she just stuck her hand on my cheek and she said, "Mummy, I love you so much. I can't live without you." I hadn't said anything.
Yeah.
You know, before she turned 3, and this is one of the big reasons I think God started my journey when he did, was I needed time to break the stuff prior to that, to allow us to address the curse placed over her life, for me to dedicate her to Satan. I wasn't meant to kill her. I was meant to dedicate her so she continued in the same family line I was born into. I remember at one stage she must have been 2.5, and we knew something big was coming. We were with you at that time.
I remember the pressure of it because it was a date, and it was like, this birthday is coming, and we've got to go through this. We've got to solve this before this birthday.
And once again, it was that compulsion. It was, I know that if I'm here, I can't stop what's going to happen. I will have to do it. I will not be able to stop this. And I just looked Kris in the face and I said, if we don't break this before she turns 3, I will leave and you will never see me again, because I will never do to my child what my mother did to me.
Yeah.
Like, I will not keep it going. I would rather disappear and never see you again and let you raise our children alone than do that to my child. You know, we went through stuff like that, and actually we were with you at that time, but we were just at the very beginning. We were just at the very beginning of working with you at that stage.
And I remember, I'm just going to kind of speed it up. God did something. He obviously, this was early on, and we had a lot of work still to do.
Yeah.
But that compulsion, whatever that was, whether it was a part, whether that was a demon, I don't even remember exactly, but we worked through that, and God healed you from that.
Yes.
And God made that go away. And that's where you invited us to your house for her birthday.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we came to your house, as I was sharing in an earlier podcast, where I'm going, do I take my family over to their house, you know, because we had these little babies too, you know, and that's where God told me to just love you and don't be afraid, that love overcomes this stuff. And so that's why we went. And
I mean, it was an awesome celebration, because
it was
that thing that you thought was impossible to break off, God did.
Yeah,
he broke it off.
Absolutely. And we were just talking about her this morning. She is the most delightful, funny, compassionate, caring.
She is an awesome little girl.
Person.
She's not so little anymore.
She gets to be who God has called her to be.
Yeah.
And that's amazing.
Yeah, she does. And it is beautiful. But I mean, as far as churches and pastors, there's just so much to say. I would say definitely come from the standpoint that you have always come from. You just love them, and you just be led by the Holy Spirit, because we have dealt with so many prayer ministries trying to find help. What you do is unique in the sense that so many other prayer ministries, there's a list or there's a protocol, or, you know, there's a way to do it that's, I don't think is authentic in God's eyes. Like, it's not the way God intended it. Not to say that they each have elements that can be helpful, but overall, I don't think they really work in the way that God intends, which is He leads the process. And it is like you said, it's a teamwork. Yeah. It's a process where you both talk and pray and you know, are led by God.
Well, I would say you're being very nice to these pastors. First off, I'd say man up and stop being a baby about it. Stop operating in fear.
Yeah. Fear is a big one.
You know what? Yes, maybe you don't understand everything. I don't, like, I've been with you this long. I don't understand all this.
Yeah.
I just trust God and have gone through the process with you. But I would say you need to approach people with love and with acceptance to hear their story, hear their heart. Do not be judgmental.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to get judgmental real fast. And if there are things that you just don't understand and it's over your head, you've got to give those things to God, because there's a person there sitting there. So that's what I would say to pastors, just as a pastor to pastor, is come on. And yes, I do know I have an anointing on my life and I have a calling in this area. Not everybody's called to this. Not everybody's anointed for this, but you can help somebody way beyond your capacity to know these things and to do all this. Like, knowledge is secondary. It's about showing God's love and being somebody who accepts and loves a person, even in their junk. We're not here to judge. We're here to help people come closer to Christ. And so even if all you can do is be a listening ear and just listen, authentically go, I hear you. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you, but I'll do my best, or I'll find somebody or whatever. At least do it in love and acceptance. And you know what? It's a big thing in the world with women, you know, the Me Too movement, where so many victims are not heard. Their stories are not heard. They do speak out, but nobody listens. And that's just for a simple sort of thing. When we're talking about SRA, this is such a complex thing. And to never be heard, you know, just because you don't understand it, it is, as you have said, it's almost more damaging than the horrible stuff you've been through.
Yeah. I mean, I would sum it up by saying, follow God, believe the person, love them, and be patient. I mean, if you follow those steps, you're going to help them. You may not know what you're doing and it may be difficult, but if you just follow God, believe them, and love them and be patient, I think those 4 things will get you a long way in ministering to the broken.
Thank you for tuning in to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Thanks for listening to our episode today, and be sure to listen next week for the final conclusion of Leah and Kris's story. We pray you have a great day.